The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over Seoul's skyline as people went about their daily routines. Lee Hana hummed softly while changing the bandages of a young patient at Seoul Children's Hospital. Her gentle hands and warm smile had become a familiar comfort to the children in Ward 7, where she volunteered 3 times a week after school. "It's going to be okay, little one," she said softly in Korean, adjusting the teddy bear next to a sleeping 5-year-old. The spring breeze carried cherry blossom petals through the open window, a few landing on her neat volunteer uniform. That's when the sky changed. At first it was just a shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Then the clouds parted, revealing massive ships that seemed to materialize from nowhere. They were beautiful in a terrifying way. Smooth, dark surfaces that absorbed light rather than reflected it, stretching for kilometers across Seoul's sky. Hannah's first thought wasn't of fear, but of the children. Some were already pressing their faces against the windows, while others began to cry in confusion. She quickly moved through the ward, closing blinds and trying to maintain calm with a steadiness she didn't feel. "Look, it's just like in the movies," she said cheerfully, though her hands trembled slightly as she helped a young boy back to his bed. "We're all going to stay together and be very brave, okay?" The hospital's emergency protocols activated. Red lights began flashing silently in the corridors, and Hana could hear the nurses organizing an evacuation. She had trained for earthquakes and fires, but nothing like this. The first message from the Macquarie came through every screen and device simultaneously. Their language was strange, clicking and hollow, translated by their own technology into flat, emotionless Korean and English. "People of Earth, we are the Macquarie Empire. Your world is now under our protection. Resist, and we will demonstrate our power. Accept, and you will serve a greater purpose." Hannah watched the children's faces as they listened. She saw fear, confusion, and in some of the older ones, anger. She remembered something her grandmother used to say: "In times of crisis, we must be mountains, steady and strong for those who need shelter." The hospital's chief physician appeared in the doorway. "Hannah, we're evacuating the ward. Can you help with the younger patients?" She nodded, already moving to gather the most critical cases. They had practiced emergency evacuations before. She knew exactly which children needed to be moved first, which ones could walk on their own, and which ones needed special care. That's when the Macquarie decided to demonstrate their power. The beam that hit Seoul Tower was silent. One moment the iconic structure stood proud against the sky. The next, it simply ceased to exist. The shockwave that followed was anything but quiet. It rolled through the city like thunder, shattering windows and shaking buildings to their foundations. The hospital trembled. Cracks appeared in the ceiling of Ward 7, spreading like lightning across the white surface. Hannah looked up, then at the children still in their beds. In that split second, she made a choice that would change the course of human history. "Run," she shouted to the mobile patients, already moving toward the nearest bed-bound child. She managed to help 3 of them into the corridor before the first pieces of ceiling began to fall. The 4th child, a 7-year-old named Minho, was still strapped to monitors that were taking too long to disconnect. The security cameras caught what happened next. Hana throwing herself over Minho as the ceiling came down. Her body curled protectively around him, her last act one of instinctive sacrifice. When the rescue teams finally reached them, they found Minho scared but alive, protected by the shield Hana had made of herself. The Macquarie's response to the international outrage that followed was dismissive. Their ambassador, a tall, insectoid being that moved with unsettling grace, addressed the United Nations Security Council. "We regret that your primitive structures were unable to withstand even a minimal display of our capabilities. To compensate for the loss of your young female, we offer 10 kilograms of rare earth elements. This is more than generous, given her limited productive value to your society." They didn't understand. How could they? They saw humans as barely evolved primates, incapable of representing a true threat. They didn't know that humans had been preparing for them for centuries, hiding their true capabilities behind a facade of division and technological limitation. They didn't know that Lee Hanna's death would be the match that lit a fire that would burn their empire to ashes. As news of her sacrifice spread, something changed in the human response to the invasion. The usual panic and chaos gave way to an eerie calm. Military bases worldwide went quiet. Scientists disappeared from public view. Government officials stopped responding to Macquarie communications. In the ruins of Seoul Children's Hospital, rescue workers found a blood-stained volunteer badge. On it, a simple photo showed a smiling girl with kind eyes and a gentle face. The image would soon become the symbol of humanity's response to alien aggression. The Macquarie had made a fatal error. They had killed a child, not a soldier, not a politician, but a 16-year-old girl whose only crime was trying to protect those weaker than herself. They thought they were demonstrating their power. Instead, they had revealed their fundamental weakness. They didn't understand that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its weapons or technology, but in its capacity for sacrifice, memory, and vengeance. As the sun set on that first day of contact, the Macquarie celebrated what they saw as a successful demonstration of their superiority. They didn't notice the silence spreading across Earth's communication channels. They didn't see the hidden facilities activating deep beneath the world's mountains and oceans. They didn't realize that humanity had just stopped pretending to be primitive. The war that followed would teach them the true cost of underestimating humanity. And it all began with a young girl named Lee Hanna, who died making sure others could live. The security footage played on Admiral Park Daho's screen for the 7th time that evening. His hands were steady as he poured another glass of soju, but his eyes never left the image of Lee Hanna's final moments. The timestamp on the video showed 14:23, less than 30 seconds before the ceiling collapsed. In those grainy images, Hanna moved with purpose. There was no panic in her movements as she helped children to safety, no hesitation when she made the choice to shield Minho with her own body. The camera caught her final smile, a gentle, reassuring expression meant to calm a frightened child. Then static and darkness. Park touched the photo of his daughter on his desk. My Young was the same age as Hanna, with the same kind eyes and determined spirit. She too volunteered at hospitals. The thought made his throat tight. His secure phone buzzed. It was Admiral Williams from the U.S. Pacific Fleet, a man he'd met only twice at international military exercises, where they'd pretended to be technological inferiors to maintain humanity's carefully crafted facade. "I saw the footage," Williams said without preamble. His voice was rough with emotion. "My Sarah volunteers at Boston Children's. She could have been, it could have been. It could have been any of our children," Park finished quietly. The Macquarie must never know how close they came to their own extinction today. One more child, one more hospital. He left the thought unfinished. Across the world, similar conversations were taking place. In Moscow, Commander Lee Jin watched the same footage in a bunker deep beneath the city. Her grandmother's stories of fleeing North Korea had taught her about the price of freedom and the value of preparation. Now those lessons would serve all of humanity. "Begin Protocol Sentinel," she ordered, her voice carrying to military commands worldwide through channels that had laid dormant for decades. Humanity had prepared for this moment since the first radio signals from space had warned them they weren't alone. In hidden facilities across Earth, machines that had been sleeping for years hummed to life. Soldiers who had trained in secret their entire lives moved into position. Scientists who had developed technologies far beyond what humanity publicly displayed began final preparations. The Macquarie's arrogance had prevented them from asking obvious questions. Why did a species capable of splitting the atom still burn fossil fuels? Why did a race that could map the human genome still die from curable diseases? Why did nations with the ability to reach Mars maintain armies that used seemingly primitive weapons? The answer was simple. Humanity had learned long ago that the best defense was to be underestimated. In Geneva, the World Security Council convened in their true chamber. deep underground. The public believed them to be a weak, bureaucratic organization. In reality, they had been preparing Earth's unified defense for generations. The footage from Seoul has gone viral. The Chinese representative reported, "Even with our controls on information flow, we cannot contain it. Perhaps we should not try." The Indian representative nodded. "Let them see. Let them all see what the Makari truly are. Hannah's sacrifice will unite humanity in a way our careful planning never could." In orbit, the International Space Station continued its seemingly peaceful mission. The Makari didn't realize that beneath its civilian exterior lay the control center for humanity's real space fleet, hidden in plain sight. Commander Kim Sun-hai, the station's true commander, received the activation codes with grim satisfaction. "Begin power-up sequence for the defense grid," she ordered. Around Earth, hundreds of satellites that appeared to be debris or old weather stations transformed, revealing weapons that had waited decades to be used. But it was the small moments that truly showed humanity's unity. In a London pub, a British soldier and a German pilot watched the footage together in silence, then nodded to each other and left for their bases without a word. In a Cairo market, ancient rivals shared bread and made plans. In the favelas of Rio, gang leaders ordered their people to assist military preparations. The Makari noticed the unusual silence from Earth's governments, but attributed it to fear and submission. They didn't understand that humans were never more dangerous than when they grew quiet. In Seoul, as rescue workers continued to clear the hospital rubble, they found something that would become another symbol of resistance. In the pocket of Hannah's volunteer uniform was a letter she had written to one of her young patients. "Remember to be brave. Sometimes the scariest things in life lead to the most beautiful changes." Admiral Park read the letter as dawn broke over Seoul. His daughter Mayung had asked to enlist, to fight for what Hannah had died protecting. He had agreed, knowing humanity would need every willing hand for what was coming. The Admiral looked out his window at the Makari ships still hovering over the city. They thought their demonstration of power had cowed humanity. They didn't realize that every human who saw Hannah's sacrifice had made the same silent promise. Never again. "Send the signal," he ordered his aide. "All commands, all stations. Operation Guardian begins now." Across the Earth, humanity stopped pretending to be divided. They had maintained the facade of separation for centuries, knowing that someday they would need the element of surprise. That day had come, brought about by the death of a single brave girl who had reminded them all what they were fighting for. The war that followed would teach the Makari that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their hidden weapons or secret technology. It was in their ability to unite, to remember, and to ensure that no other child would ever die protecting the weak from those who thought themselves strong. In the depths of a mountain laboratory in Daejeon, Dr. Kim Yuri hadn't slept in 48 hours. Her eyes were fixed on the quantum field readings as another test cycle completed. Coffee cups littered her workstation, testament to the endless nights spent perfecting humanity's shield technology. "Run it again," she ordered, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. The laboratory hummed as the quantum shield generator spun up for its 100th test of the day. On the testing floor, a miniature version of the Makari's energy weapon, recreated from scans of the Seoul attack, prepared to fire at the shield. The beam struck the quantum barrier. This time, instead of dispersing or breaking through, it bounced back, perfectly reflected. Yuri allowed herself a small smile, the first since news of Lee Hannah's death had reached her team. "Send the data to all facilities," she said, already starting calculations for full-scale implementation. "Tell them we're ready for Phase 2. 300 kilometers away, in a hidden facility beneath Mount Surak, Song Min watched as another group of recruits ran through combat drills. They moved with precision that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago, but necessity had proven to be an excellent teacher. "Again," he called out, his voice carrying across the underground training arena. "The Makari won't give you second chances." The recruits, a mix of former soldiers and civilians, reset their positions without complaint. They all knew what was at stake. Min's comm unit buzzed, a message from similar facilities worldwide. China's hidden bases in the Himalayas were ready. Russia's Ural mountain complexes had completed their preparations. The American facilities beneath the Rockies reported full combat readiness. The Macquarie satellites passing overhead saw nothing but peaceful mountains and forests, their sensors fooled by decades-old cloaking technology. They reported back to their commanders that Earth's military forces remained primitive and disorganized, noting with satisfaction the apparent cessation of most military exercises. In orbit, aboard the Macquarie command ship, Supreme Commander Vex Till received a strange transmission. It came from a species calling themselves the Centaurians, a race the Macquarie had dismissed as too passive to be worth conquering. They were right. Across the globe, ancient enemies found themselves working together. Israeli and Palestinian hackers collaborated to probe Macquarie communications. Indian and Pakistani military commanders shared intelligence. North and South Korean soldiers prepared to fight side by side. "We feel compelled to warn you," the Centaurian message stated. "Your actions on Earth, particularly regarding the child Lihana, may have consequences you cannot foresee. We have observed humanity for centuries. Their response to threats against their young ones is extreme." Vex Till dismissed the warning with a gesture of his upper appendages. The humans had shown no significant response to their demonstration of power. Their military bases appeared inactive, their governments were silent, and their population seemed properly subdued. Back on Earth, in a secret command center beneath the Swiss Alps, the world's true military leaders monitored the Macquarie's complacency with grim satisfaction. Decades of practicing deception were paying off. The aliens saw what they expected to see, a primitive species cowering before superior technology. They didn't see the quantum shield generators being installed in every major city. They missed the deployment of advanced weapon systems that had been hidden underground for generations. They failed to notice the activation of humanity's real space fleet, concealed in asteroid bases and beneath the lunar surface. In her lab, Yuri finally allowed herself 4 hours of sleep, dreaming of her sister who had been in Seoul during the attack. When she woke, she made a final adjustment to the shield harmonics, ensuring they would protect not just against the Macquarie's known weapons, but against anything their arrogance might devise. Song Min received word that the last of the civilian evacuations was complete. Cities worldwide now held only those who would fight, while billions of others waited in vast underground shelters that the Macquarie had never detected. Every child was safe. Humanity had learned its lesson after Hana. In orbit, another Centaurian warning arrived at the Macquarie flagship. This one was shorter. "We have witnessed humanity's response to tragedy before. When they grow quiet, they are not surrendering. They are preparing." Commander Vex Till laughed at the warning, the sound echoing through his ship's command center. He had just received reports of humans dismantling their primitive military bases. What he didn't know was that those bases were empty shells, their real forces long since moved to hidden facilities. Yuri completed her final calculations and sent the activation codes for the quantum shield network. Across Earth, invisible barriers sprang to life, undetectable to Macquarie sensors, but strong enough to withstand their strongest weapons. Song Min watched his last training group graduate, knowing they would soon join the billions of soldiers waiting for the signal. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for this moment, hiding their true strength behind a carefully constructed mask of weakness and division. The Macquarie sensors reported no unusual activity on Earth. They didn't detect the massive energy signatures of the quantum shields, didn't notice the movement of troops and weapons through hidden tunnels, didn't see the fleet assembling in the shadow of the moon. They had killed a child, expecting submission. Instead, they had activated a defense system generations in the making. Humanity had learned long ago that the best way to protect their children was to be ready for anything. The real war was about to begin, and the Macquarie would learn too late that Earth's silence wasn't submission. It was the calm before a storm that they had never imagined possible. Captain Choi Sun stood on the bridge of the HSS Remembrance, her hand steady on the tactical console. The massive ship, hidden for years in the dark side of the moon, hummed with power that humanity had kept secret for generations. Through the view screen, she could see the Macquarie flagship floating arrogantly above Earth, its shields shimmering with what they thought was invincible technology. "All stations report ready, Captain," her first officer announced. Around the bridge, crew members sat at their posts, faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of advanced human technology that the Macquarie never suspected existed. "Send the signal to all ships," Sun ordered. "Advanced weapons free. Remember why we fight today." Across the hidden fleet, crews touched the memorial plates mounted on their bridge walls. Each ship carried the name and image of a child lost to conflict. The HSS Lihana, leading the first wave, displayed the hospital security footage of its namesake's final moments on a continuous loop in its mess hall. "Target their flagship's primary shield generator," Sun commanded. "Single shot. Let's show them what humanity has been hiding." The graviton lance charged silently, drawing power from technology that Earth had developed decades ago, but kept hidden, knowing this day would come. On the tactical display, Sun watched the targeting solution lock into place. "For Hannah," she whispered, and pressed the firing control. The lance of concentrated gravitational energy crossed the space between Earth and the Macquarie flagship in less than a second. There was no beam of light, no dramatic explosion, just a sudden collapse of the alien vessel's supposedly impenetrable shields. On the Macquarie bridge, Supreme Commander Vextil's superior expression turned to shock as alarms blared. "Impossible," he chittered in his native tongue. "Their technology is primitive. They have no weapons that could." Another alarm cut him off as his sensors suddenly detected hundreds of ships emerging from hiding places throughout the solar system. They rose from beneath the lunar surface, emerged from asteroids, and decloaked from Earth orbit, each one bearing the name of a child. "This is Captain Choi Sun of the Human Defense Fleet." Her transmission cut across all frequencies, overriding the Macquarie's communications. "You killed our children. You dismissed our worth. You called us primitive. That was your last mistake." The HSS Lihana moved into position, its hull gleaming with technology that had been refined over centuries of secret development. Behind it, ships named after children lost to wars, disasters, and alien aggression formed up in attack formation. "All ships, execute Battle Plan Genesis," Sun ordered. Across the fleet, weapons that humanity had hidden from alien observation powered up. Quantum torpedoes, gravity wells, temporal disruptors, all the technology that Earth had developed while maintaining its facade of technological inferiority. The Macquarie attempted to rally their forces, but they had positioned their fleet assuming human weapons would be limited to chemical rockets and nuclear devices. They had never imagined facing an armada of ships that could manipulate gravity itself. "Second wave, decloak and engage," Sun commanded. More ships appeared, emerging from what had appeared to be empty space. The Macquarie's sensors, overwhelmed by technology they had never encountered, could barely track the human vessels as they moved into attack position. On Earth, Yuri's quantum shields flickered to life around every city, their existence finally revealed. Song Min's trained forces emerged from their hidden bases, equipped with weapons that made the Macquarie's energy rifles look like children's toys. The HSS Lihana struck first, its weapons targeting the Macquarie flagship's command center. The alien vessel's secondary shields collapsed as easily as the first, unable to withstand weapons designed specifically to counter their technology. "You should have listened to the Centaurians," Sun transmitted to the Macquarie commander. "When humanity grows quiet, we are not surrendering. We are preparing." The battle that followed was brief but decisive. Human ships, built with technology refined through centuries of secret development, tore through the Macquarie fleet. Each vessel fought with the accumulated rage of a species that had watched one of their children die. From her command chair, Sun watched as the Macquarie flagship tried to retreat, only to find its engines disabled by weapons they hadn't known existed. The aliens who had dismissed humanity as primitive now faced the full technological might of a species that had learned the value of patience and preparation. All ships execute containment protocol, Sun ordered. The human fleet moved with practiced precision, surrounding the remaining Makari vessels. They had trained for this moment in hidden facilities throughout the solar system, preparing for the day when humanity would reveal its true strength. As the last Makari ship surrendered, Sun looked at the image of Lihanna displayed on her tactical screen. The young girl's sacrifice had become the catalyst for humanity's awakening, the moment when they could finally stop hiding their true capabilities. The HSS Remembrance's sensors detected more Makari ships arriving at the edge of the solar system, reinforcements responding to their fleet's distress call. They would find not the primitive species they expected, but a humanity fully awakened, protecting their children with technology beyond anything the Makari had imagined possible. All ships, battle stations, Sun commanded, a grim smile on her face. Let's show them what humanity can really do. The war had begun, and Earth's children would never be threatened again. The Makari High Council chambers, once a symbol of their 10,000-year dominion, lay in ruins. Admiral Park Daeho walked through the debris, his boots crunching on shattered crystal that had once adorned the ceiling of the aliens' most sacred meeting place. Just 6 months had passed since they killed Lihanna. 6 months to bring down an empire that had ruled 1,000 worlds. Another system has surrendered, Admiral, his aide reported, holding up a data tablet. The Centauri forces are helping secure the transition. That makes 812 worlds liberated. Park nodded, stopping to examine a fallen banner bearing the Makari imperial crest. The aliens have been so proud of their history, so certain of their superiority. They hadn't understood that humanity's apparent technological weakness was a choice, not a limitation. On the other side of the chamber, salvage teams were recovering data cores from the Council's archives. Each one revealed more about how deeply the Makari had underestimated Earth. Their reports dismissed human ships as primitive, human weapons as ineffective, human resolve as weak. They had documented everything except what mattered: humanity's capacity for memory and vengeance. Play the final transmission, Park ordered. The aide activated a holographic display, showing the last moments of the Makari High Council before human forces breached their defenses. Impossible, the High Commander's translated voice echoed through the ruined chamber. They were nothing. Primitive. How could they advance so quickly? The recording showed the moment of realization. Too late. As the aliens finally understood, humanity hadn't advanced quickly. They had been advanced all along, hiding their true strength until the moment was right. Each human victory had carried a message. The HSS Lihanna led the assault on the Makari shipyards, its quantum weapons reducing their mighty construction facilities to atoms. The HSS Remembrance destroyed their communication hubs, cutting off their ability to coordinate defense. Every human ship bore the name of a child lost to violence. Every crew fought with the determination of those who had learned the cost of weakness. Report from Earth Command, the aide said. The last Makari holdout in the Orion sector has fallen. Captain Choi Sun's fleet encountered minimal resistance. Park walked to the window overlooking the Makari capital city. The alien architecture, once imposing and elegant, now seemed fragile. Like their empire, it had been built on the assumption of superiority rather than true strength. Human quantum shields now protected the conquered worlds, the same technology that the Makari had dismissed as impossible 6 months ago. Song Min's trained forces had proved that human combat skills, honed through centuries of conflict, far surpassed the Makari's automated warfare. "Show me the liberation footage," Park commanded. The aide projected images from across the fallen empire. On world after world, oppressed species celebrated as human forces arrived. They had expected conquerors but found liberators instead. Humanity remembered its own history of colonization, too well to repeat those mistakes. In the Council Chamber's archives, they found thousands of warnings from other species about humanity. The Centaurians had tried to tell them. The Andromeda Alliance had sent diplomatic notices. Even some of the Macquarie's own scientists had noted unusual patterns in Earth's development, all ignored by leaders too arrogant to believe they could be defeated. "Sir," the aide interrupted Park's thoughts, "we found their first assessment of Earth, from before they killed Hannah." The report was telling. The Macquarie had seen Earth's apparent weaknesses: fossil fuel usage, primitive space travel, divided nations, and assumed they were seeing humanity's limits. They hadn't realized they were seeing a carefully maintained facade, a species hiding its strength until the right moment. They'd never understood what they were facing, Park said softly. They thought they were fighting our weapons. They were really fighting our memory. Each conquered Macquarie world added to the evidence of their fatal mistake. They had built their empire on technology and force, believing these were the only measures of strength. They hadn't counted on facing a species that had turned loss into resolve, grief into determination. The liberation of their 1,000 worlds had taken just 6 months, but humanity had been preparing for centuries. Every ship, every weapon, every tactic had been refined through generations of hidden development. The Macquarie never had a chance. They had lost the moment they dismissed human life as worthless. "Final casualty reports are in," the aide said. "Minimal losses on our side." The quantum shields held on every engagement. Park nodded, thinking of the girl whose death had triggered all this. Lee Hannah would be the last human child to die at alien hands. The empire that had ruled 1,000 systems had fallen because they didn't understand a simple truth. Humanity's strength lay not in its weapons, but in its ability to remember and unite. "Prepare the announcement," Park ordered. "Let every species in the galaxy know. The Macquarie Empire has fallen. Earth stands ready to help rebuild, to ensure no other children die from the arrogance of those who think themselves superior." As he left the ruined council chamber, Park passed a group of former Macquarie subjects learning about Earth's history. They were watching footage from human conflicts, seeing how each loss had been transformed into preparation for the future. They were learning what the Macquarie had failed to understand: that humanity's greatest weapon was its memory, and its greatest strength was its capacity to unite in the face of threat. The price of arrogance had been an empire. The cost of underestimating humanity had been everything the Macquarie had built over 10,000 years. As Park returned to his ship, he thought of Lee Hannah and all the children whose names now adorned humanity's fleet. Their memory had brought down an empire, and their legacy would ensure it never rose again. Ambassador Kang Hae-Newell stood before the assembled representatives of 57 spacefaring civilizations in the newly constructed Galactic Council chamber on Luna. The transparent dome above showed Earth hanging in the black sky, a constant reminder of what they were fighting to protect. "The evidence speaks for itself," she said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. "But before we begin the formal proceedings, I would like to show you why we are here today." The lights dimmed, and the holographic display activated. The security footage from Seoul Children's Hospital played in perfect clarity, enhanced by technology that humanity had kept hidden for so long. The assembled aliens watched in silence as Lee Hannah moved through her final moments. The Centaurian representative's crystalline form vibrated with emotion as they watched Hannah shield the children with her own body. The Andromedan's color-shifting skin turned deep blue, their species' expression of grief. Even the stoic Regelians showed signs of distress. In the defendant's box, the former Macquarie High Commander shifted uncomfortably. His once proud posture was gone, replaced by the bearing of one who finally understood the magnitude of his mistakes. "This recording," Hae-Newell continued, "shows the moment the Macquarie Empire sealed its fate, not through the act of killing itself, tragic as that was, but through their response to it." She played the next recording, the Macquarie ambassador offering mineral compensation for Hannah's death. The chamber erupted in sounds of disgust from multiple species. The Centaurian representative's crystals turned blood red with anger. "We call our first witness," Hae-Newell announced. "Minho, the child whom Lee Hannah gave her life to protect." The boy, now 8 years old, walked into the chamber. He carried himself with remarkable composure for one so young. In his hands, he held Hannah's volunteer badge, preserved from that day. "Can you tell us what you remember?" Newell asked gently. Minho spoke clearly, his words translated instantly for all present. She smiled at me. Even when the ceiling was falling, she smiled and told me everything would be okay. She made herself into a shield. His voice wavered but remained strong. She didn't even know me very well, but she chose to save me. The Macquarie defendants watched, their alien features showing something close to shame as they finally began to understand what their arrogance had cost them. Next came Dr. Kim Yuri, the quantum physicist who had helped perfect humanity's shielding technology. "We could have revealed our true capabilities at any time," she testified. "We chose to hide them, to wait, to prepare. But when they killed Hannah, when they dismissed her death as insignificant, they proved they were too dangerous to be allowed to continue." The evidence mounted. Admiral Park Dae-ho presented tactical data, showing how the Macquarie had specifically targeted civilian areas in their demonstration of power. Captain Choi Sun detailed the massive refugee crisis the Macquarie had created across their 1,000 worlds. But it was the simple hospital footage that proved most damning. The Galactic Council watched it again and again, seeing in Hannah's sacrifice everything the Macquarie Empire had lacked: compassion, courage, and the understanding that true strength lies in protecting others. "The defense may present its case," the Council Chief Justice announced. The Macquarie advocate rose, his movements uncertain. We did not understand," he began. "We saw technological advancement as the only measure of civilization. We failed to recognize." "You failed to recognize that a species' worth is not measured by its weapons," Newell interrupted, "but by how it treats its most vulnerable members." The verdict came swiftly. The Galactic Council found the Macquarie leadership guilty of crimes against sentient beings. Their punishment would not be death. Humanity had learned better than that. Instead, they would spend their lives helping rebuild the worlds they had destroyed, working alongside the very species they had once dismissed as inferior. As the sentence was read, Newell looked up at the earth hanging in the black sky above. Somewhere in Seoul, a memorial stood where Lee Hannah had made her sacrifice. It had become a pilgrimage site for species across the galaxy, a reminder that true strength often comes in the quietest moments, in the choices made when no one expects heroism. The Macquarie leaders were led away, not in chains but under the watch of a multi-species peacekeeping force. Their empire was gone, transformed into a cooperative of free worlds. Their technology would be shared, their resources redistributed, their knowledge used to help rather than dominate. "This tribunal is adjourned," the Chief Justice announced, "but let its lesson be remembered. Let the name Lee Hannah stand as a reminder that the measure of a civilization lies not in its power to destroy, but in its willingness to protect." As the chamber emptied, Newell remained, watching the hospital footage one final time. In those grainy images, a 16-year-old girl made a choice that would change the galaxy. She chose to protect, to save, to give everything for others. In doing so, she had taught the galaxy what humanity had known all along: that true strength lies not in domination, but in sacrifice. The stars shone through the dome above, each one now part of a galaxy that understood justice a little better. The Macquarie had ruled through fear for 10,000 years. It took the courage of one human girl to show them, and everyone else, a better way. Cherry blossoms drifted through the crisp morning air in Yongsan Park, some landing gently on the outstretched bronze hand of Lee Hannah's statue. The memorial, a testament to both loss and hope, stood surrounded by flowers from 100 different worlds, some glowing softly in the dawn light, others shifting colors with the breeze. Minho, now 18, adjusted his hospital volunteer uniform as he prepared for the annual remembrance ceremony. He had followed in Hannah's footsteps, spending his free time helping children just as she had done. The badge on his chest bore her name alongside his own, a tradition started by hospital volunteers worldwide. "The first delegations are arriving," his supervisor whispered. Through the park's winding paths, representatives from across the galaxy approached the memorial. The Centaurians came first, their crystalline forms refracting the morning sunlight into rainbow patterns. Each carried a piece of their homeworld's eternal flame, crystals that would burn for centuries. Behind them walked the former Makari High Commander, now aged and humbled. After serving his sentence, he had requested permission to attend the ceremony. Each year, he laid a single black flower, his species' symbol of deepest regret, at the statue's feet. The memorial itself seemed to glow in the early light. The bronze figure captured Hannah in perfect detail, her gentle smile, her hospital uniform, one hand reaching toward the stars while the other protectively embraced a child. The plaque at its base had been translated into every known language in the galaxy. Admiral Park Daho, now retired, stood beside his daughter Mai Young. She had followed her father into the space fleet, commanding a ship named after another child lost to conflict. The admiral's hair had turned gray, but his eyes still held the same determination they had shown during the war. 10 years, he murmured, watching more delegations arrive. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. The ceremony began as the sun cleared the horizon. Minho stepped forward first, his voice clear in the morning air. He told the story of that day, not from historical records or official accounts, but from the perspective of a 7-year-old who had witnessed true courage. "She didn't hesitate," he said. "When the ceiling began to fall, she could have run. Instead, she smiled at me and became my shield. That smile taught me what real strength looks like." One by one, representatives from across the galaxy shared their own stories. The Centaurians spoke of how Hannah's sacrifice had changed their understanding of protection and duty. The Andromedans described how her story had transformed their military doctrine from one of force to one of defense. Even the former Makari commander spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. "We ruled 1,000 worlds through fear," he admitted. "It took a human child to show us how wrong we were. Her courage revealed our cowardice. Her sacrifice exposed our selfishness." The gathered crowd watched as holographic images played above the statue, scenes from the hospital, the war, and the peace that followed. They saw how one moment of sacrifice had rippled across the galaxy, changing not just the course of history, but the very way species understood each other. Dr. Kim Yuri, her hair now streaked with silver, explained how Hannah's death had led to the sharing of technology across civilizations. "We no longer hide our advancements," she said. "Instead, we share them to prevent another child from having to make such a sacrifice." Captain Choi Sun, still commanding the HSS Remembrance, described how every ship in the human fleet now carried a copy of Hannah's story. "Not as a reminder of vengeance," she explained, "but as a lesson in why we serve, to protect, to defend, to ensure that courage like hers need never be required again." As the ceremony continued, more flowers were laid at the statue's feet. Each species brought their own tributes: living lights from the Andromeda worlds, eternal ice from the rings of Saturn, singing crystals from distant stars. The memorial had become more than a monument to loss. It was a symbol of unity, of lessons learned at terrible cost. The Lee-Hanna Protocol, now standard procedure for all first contact situations, was recited in every known language. Its principles, derived from her sacrifice, had prevented countless conflicts and saved millions of lives across the galaxy. As the sun reached its zenith, Minho laid the final tribute: Hannah's original volunteer badge, preserved for a decade. "She taught us that true strength lies not in the ability to take life," he said, "but in the willingness to give it for others." The gathered representatives observed a moment of silence, broken only by the soft rustling of cherry blossoms. In that quiet moment, they remembered not just a human girl who had died protecting others, but the change her death had brought to the galaxy. The ceremony ended as it always did, with a promise. Representatives from every world stepped forward to renew their commitment to the principles Hannah's sacrifice had taught them. They pledged not just to remember, but to ensure that such sacrifice would never be needed again. As the delegations departed, Minho remained by the statue, looking up at the face of the girl who had saved his life. The bronze hand still reached toward the stars, not in challenge or defiance, but in an eternal offer of protection and hope. The Lehana Memorial stood as a reminder that the greatest changes often come not from displays of power or technological might, but from simple acts of courage and compassion. In death, she had taught the galaxy what humanity had known all along, that true strength lies in the willingness to protect others, even at the greatest cost.